I'm NASA Press Secretary Jackie McGinnis, and I'm joined here today by NASA leadership. We'll be taking media questions from folks here in the room and over the phone about NASA and Boeing's second orbital flight test, scheduled for liftoff tomorrow at 2:53 p.m. Today, we'll hear from NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy, Associate Administrator Bob Cabana, and Director of NASA's Kennedy Space Center, Janet Petro. First, I'd like to welcome Janet Petro to kick us off.
Thank you, Jackie. Good morning and welcome to the Kennedy Space Center. You know, it's a very exciting day for us here at America's premier multi-user spaceport for the Boeing's OFT launch to tomorrow. And, you know, we're really busy at Kennedy. This is one of many launches that we're going to be supporting this year, including Artemis 1 and many commercial crew, cargo, and crew flights later this year. And I can't really forget our support to the science. We have Landsat coming up, and we're going to be supporting that from Vandenberg. And we have a number of launches from both the East Coast and the West Coast. Now, it's my honor to introduce you to our first speaker, and he is no stranger to space. He served the public for the past 4 decades, starting with the state legislator, and then he was a congressman, and then he served 3 terms as a senator in public service before being named our administrator. So please help me in welcoming Administrator Senator Bill Nelson.
Hey, good morning. I want you to know that it's good to be home. This is the county that I grew up in, and it's indeed just a great privilege for me to be asked by Joe Biden to head up NASA. There are so many exciting things that are happening. And it's all in the remainder of this year. We are not only doing this test flight, which of course will then be followed by the crewed flight. There'll be another crewed flight of SpaceX. We're going to launch the James Webb telescope. It is going to be positioned 1 million miles from Earth, and it's going to look through a little keyhole back into the far reaches of space, if you can believe it, to light capturing that is 13.35 billion years old. I mean, that's enough to blow your mind right there. And we're going to be launching the largest, most powerful rocket ever at the end of this year. Yesterday, we got a chance to go over to the Vehicle Assembly Building and see it. And, you know, the 3 of us are accustomed to walking up to the shuttle and seeing that with the 2 solids on either side. This center core is so much bigger than the external tank. And it is going to pack on this launch 8.8 million pounds of thrust. You better get your earplugs, even though you're going to be 3 miles away. This is the excitement that we have going on in NASA. Now, I'm just privileged to have a very professional team with us. And the first one I want you to meet is Pam Melroy, retired colonel in the Air Force, the second woman test pilot in the Air Force, the second woman pilot, commander astronaut in NASA. And fortunately, she is now my partner in this adventure as we venture out into the stars. Pam?
Thank you, sir. It is a great privilege to be your partner in this effort. And to me, it's a wonderful thing to come home to NASA. And I'm just loving being back in Florida, too. It's so incredibly inspiring. I do want to talk about something near and dear to my heart. We're here, of course, for the Boeing OFT-2 launch, but I just want to talk about the International Space Station, its destination, for a moment. I was very privileged over the course of the 3 flights that I had to help assemble the space station. And to me, the huge reward has been the science that we have been able to accomplish in microgravity because of the International Space Station. I'm particularly excited that as we have the Commercial Crew Program is going to provide a boost to the crew time and the cargo, that we will be able to accomplish more science on the International Space Station. So that's one of the deeper meanings of why we're here to watch this launch and what it will accomplish for the ISS. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague and friend, Bob Cabana, Associate Administrator.
Thanks, Pam. First off, I want you to know it is great to be home in Florida supporting another launch. Absolutely an exciting time. And I'd also like to congratulate our Russian partners on a successful docking of their MLM module earlier this morning, paving the way for the launch of OFT-2 and the Boeing Starliner on that ULA Atlas V tomorrow afternoon. This OFT test flight, this is really crucial. As you know, a year and a half ago in December 2019, we met a lot of objectives, but we did not meet the objective of rendezvous and docking with the International Space Station, verifying all the software and the systems needed to safely do that. So that's going to be of critical importance on this mission coming up, that we demonstrate we can do rendezvous proxops, that all the sensors work, that all the software works, the guidance, navigation, that everything works as it should. We'll get more data on the vehicle as it's docked to ISS and flying to and from the International Space Station. And we're going to bring some cargo home, too, which is critical for future missions to ISS. So an absolutely exciting time. Looking forward to tomorrow afternoon. Jackie?
Thanks, Bob. So now we'll open it up for questions. We have folks joining us in the room and on the phone, but wherever you're joining us from, please state your name and outlet before you ask your question. Go ahead.
Hi, Ken Kramer, Space Up Close. Well, thank you for all being here, and congratulations on all of your confirmations and assignments. Bill, I'd like to ask you, since you saw Artemis the other day, and you guys helped to get it ready, can you give us an update on, since you've been administrator a couple of weeks, on Artemis 3? How close, what's the timeline? Can you achieve 2024? Will it slip? Or is it possible you might have to put some other mission in the schedule? Thanks.
Well, remember that under the present schedule, we're going to go to the moon with humans in 2023. We're going to circle the moon, and we are going to bring them back safely prior to Artemis 3, which is going to transfer into a lander. Now, we've lost some time because there is this a dispute that is going to be reconciled by the General Accounting Office, and that should be coming next week. And under the law, the policies and procedures of the GAO protests, we are mute until that decision is made. But as to your larger question, space is hard. There are always things that happen, especially when you're developing new technology and you're going further and further. But this whole thing is important because what we are going to do in and around and on the moon is in preparation to go to Mars. It's a 3-day trip to the moon, but it's many months to go to Mars. And once you get there, because of the alignment of the planets, you're likely going to have to stay on the surface for a while. So we've got to develop all of these new systems and these new this new equipment and the new procedures to sustain human life for all that length of time so far away. But that can be done at the moon. So we're going when it's safe. And that's my answer to your question.
Yep, in the back.
Chris Gebhardt with NASA Spaceflight. I'm curious, we have 3 astronauts on this panel now in positions of authority in NASA in this new era where Starliner and Orion will be joining Dragon. We've got all these new crew vehicles coming on board. So I'm curious, aside from keeping crew safe, which is the ultimate thing with these vehicles, what are your experiences as astronauts that you want to instill and carry forward with these new programs aside from just crew safety?
Go ahead.
Well, I think the one thing that we all would say was very important part of an experience of being an astronaut is to work together as a team. So, and taking care of your people. So for all of us, that is an extremely high priority. And I think that the good news is NASA is, for the 9th year in a row, the best place to work in federal government. So that mentality of teamwork and taking care of your people is very much imbued across the agency and all the missions. I think I'd just like to speak for myself and maybe a little bit for Bob. Both of us were military test pilots. So the Aeronautics Directorate mission really speaks to us. I actually studied planetary science, so the Science Mission Directorate is very near and dear to my heart as well. And from my time at DARPA, I worked closely with the Space Technology Mission Directorate. One of the things that we really enjoy is a leadership team that understands that everyone has to support the goals of the agency. And so to see our senior leadership working together is a tremendous pleasure, and it's our job to actually enable that.
Thank you. Next up, we have Paul Brinkman with UPI.
Hi, yes, thanks for doing this. Regarding Starliner certification, I guess I'll direct this to the administrator. Can you talk a little more about the importance of competition in terms of commercializing NASA's programs? And if it's a commercial program and there's only one provider, is that really achieving NASA's goals? Thanks.
Well, first of all, the flight readiness review last week, it was smooth as glass. And I think that it indicates the hard work, the rigor, the preparation that went in to making this flight successful. The only thing really I'm concerned about tomorrow is there has been consistently a thunderstorm at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for the last week. So I think this flight is going to go very well. And then to specifically answer your question, competition is good, not only for the obvious reasons that it brings about the most efficient, productive, and cost-effective work product, but what it does, it gives you a backup. The proof's in the pudding. Years ago, when this competition for commercial crew started, what if we hadn't had 2 competitors? And what if it had only been Boeing? And so right there, that's enough demonstration for you of why we want competition. And then to take the implication of your question further, that's why we want competition in selecting the human landing system going forward on the moon. So that's what I expect that we're going to do. Now, you can't do all of this on something as complicated and sophisticated as this human landing system is unless you have the money. And I'm very optimistic at this point that the Congress is going to give us some additional funds that will allow us to go forward with that competition.
Thank you. Next up on the phones, we have Jeff Faust with Space News.
Good morning. A question for the administrator to follow up on his previous response. Earlier this week, Jeff Bezos, the founder of Blue Origin, sent you a letter offering basically to cut its price by $2 billion if it got a second HLS award. How would NASA evaluate that letter, assuming the GAO does not uphold the protests and force you to start over on the HLS competition?
I want you to ask me that question next week. We are prohibited by law in the procedures and policies of the GAO from commenting and getting in on this competition, this bid protest that is underway. The GAO is supposed to report by August the 4th, and then I can answer your question.
Joey Roulette, The Verge.
Thanks. Question for anybody in the panel. One of the key goals of the commercial crew program is, of course, to bring the cost down of human spaceflight and open up to people other than government astronauts. SpaceX has, sold and booked a few flights already. Boeing might do so in the future after a few flights. Is this the kind of private activity that you guys expected? And from NASA's perspective, what kind of work needs to be done in the future to keep bringing that price down? And I have one more question after, but I'll start.
And just for the folks who can't hear over the mic, the question was about the commercial crew program and bringing the cost of human spaceflight down.
Yeah, I'd like to take that. Well, first off, our goal with the commercial crew program is to commercialize low Earth orbit. We want to have a commercial economy in low Earth orbit so that we can go on and do the hard things of returning to the moon, exploring beyond our home planet, and going on to Mars. So, yes, we are absolutely meeting our goals with Boeing and SpaceX both having the ability to fly crews to ISS. To take that a step further, we want to commercialize ISS. ISS is currently the destination for these vehicles, but we want a commercial space station in orbit too, and that's going to be key, is how we commercialize low Earth orbit and expand beyond ISS, where we don't have to own and operate the entire thing. We can free up that funding for our exploration program and just buy what we need for the research in low Earth orbit. But it's establishing that low Earth orbit economy that's going to be crucial, and this is a great step in that direction. So we are absolutely meeting our goals. We need this dissimilar redundancy, and we want to see more people flying in space.
And I might add, I believe that the Congress will expand the ISS to 2030, and it would be our hope that by the end of the life of the ISS that we would have a commercial station, and that those commercial activities would be a lot more robust that Bob was talking about.
And next up, we have Rachel Joy with Florida Today.
Hi. I know we all want it to go well tomorrow, absolutely. But if, and I know it's a big if it does not go well tomorrow, what are next steps for NASA? Could that in any way affect Boeing's contracts with NASA? What would that response be?
Well, I would say we really don't want to answer a hypothetical question. We always have contingencies, but we work really hard to ensure our success tomorrow. And I think, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But obviously, we'll have plans in place to proceed on. We have a contract with Boeing. They have to meet our requirements. And we look forward to them demonstrating these requirements on this orbital test flight without crew to prepare for crew later on. And we still got some work to do before we get to that crewed flight also, but this is a huge step in that direction.
Kathy leaders that presided over the flight readiness review, it was so smooth. I think that there would have been something that would have popped up so we have enormous confidence going into tomorrow, save for the weather.
Next up on the phone, we have David Curley with the Discovery Channel.
Thank you. Administrator, if it's just a 4-year term, what are the 3 things you hope to accomplish in that term? And what about the pathway that NASA and the American space program is on? Does it need adjustment? Is there a turn that you hope to accomplish during your service?
Well, you're asking a kid who's walked into a candy store to pick 3 kinds of candies in an agency that is just so robust, so much of an exciting place. Pam told you for the 9th year in a row, it's been voted as the best place to work in the federal government. You should see the excitement. I went to the Goddard Space Center. I mean, they are so excited just in the field of science of what all's happening. They're so enthusiastic. This infectiousness is every place in NASA. It's like you're asking me to choose between our children, which is our best. Take aeronautics. We're getting ready to fly a supersonic airplane that will cause a lower sonic boom so that in the future you could have supersonic travel over populated areas. That was one of the problems with the Concorde. You could go supersonic over the ocean, but you couldn't over the land. And so there's just another example. And then, of course, exploration, research and development, the STEM programs. I think because of this excitement that we're seeing and these new accomplishments that we are going to start to develop another generation of mathematicians and technologists and engineers, not unlike what happened out of the Apollo generation that followed on for 2 generations in our educational system. We're going to be involved in that. And all along, doing all of this, we're going to be involved in making NASA reflect the diversity and strength of this country. So those are my more than 3 things.
Next up on the phone, we have Irene Klotz with Aviation Week.
Thanks, Jackie. My question, I think, is probably for Pam or for Bob. What is the status of the safety certification, or the system qualification that's underway on the 2 commercial suborbital providers that was announced probably almost a year and a half ago or so, that would pave the way for NASA personnel to fly on New Shepard and Spaceship Two? Thanks.
Yeah. Hey, Irene, I will take that as an action, and we will get you an answer on what the current status is on that evaluation.
Next up, we have Amy with space.com.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. So this flight is definitely different than the last one. There's been a global pandemic and everything like that. So what have been some of the biggest challenges in getting this capsule ready for flight?
Let's see. I understand the question. What have been the challenges getting this capsule ready for flight? Was that the question?
Yes, sorry. Dealing with like the pandemic and everything like that.
So, you know, it's with any spacecraft, the challenge is just making sure that you're doing everything correctly, that all the systems are in the right configuration, that you've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, that all the paperwork's right, that everything has been completed to get down to the point where we can safely launch. And I think, there's always issues that pop up during the processing that have to be resolved where things aren't exactly right. And ensuring that you have the detailed information that you need, that you're paying attention to all those details as you move forward in the progressing. We still got a couple things that we got to close out before we can launch tomorrow. Some of it's nominal, some of it, is something that popped up during processing. But we work through all that and get to the point where we know that when we launch, it's safe to launch. So getting a capsule ready or any spacecraft ready, it doesn't matter what it is, even if it's a scientific mission, there is an awful lot that goes into ensuring that we're ready to go. And I think the way we work together as a team between our contractors and our civil servants, we are truly unified in what we do. And I couldn't be more pleased with the commercial crew team in how they work together with both Boeing and SpaceX in ensuring that when we launch, we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, if I could just jump in here a little bit about the COVID, the pandemic. So here at Kennedy Space Center, we never shut down the center. We had to institute, precautions. You remember last year, we're back to wearing masks and so forth. So there were some challenges along those lines, just getting the right testing, the right cleaning. If there was a case on center, where we'd go in and do some additional cleaning. Perhaps. So there were those sorts of challenges amongst both the Boeing and our civil servant teams, but we worked through all those, and I think we ended up in a really good place. As Bob mentioned, the teams worked really well together, and I got to give a shout out for the Chief Medical Officer and the medical teams here at Kennedy for doing the hard work of all that tracking and tracing and following through and providing us guidance to help us operate safely out here at the Kennedy Space Center.
And I'll pile on. I'm sorry I didn't understand the question totally. I mean, I could not be more pleased with what the NASA team has accomplished during this year of COVID. When you look back, on all the missions, we never missed a beat. And we had the procedures in place to look after the people that actually had to come on site and work. We found out how we could work and do telework to still accomplish the mission. And for these crewed missions, extra procedures in place to ensure that we were isolating only those folks that needed to have access to the crew were allowed access. They had to be vaccinated once the vaccines were available. We took extra measures over and above the health stabilization program to ensure the safety of the crew. But, that safety isn't just for the crews. It's the safety of the people actually working in close contact with one another, processing the vehicles also. So we made sure that everything was followed, the CDC guidelines, that we did things right, and all that extra cleaning Janet talked about.
And next up on the phone, we have Mika Maidenberg with Wall Street Journal.
Hi, Administrator Nelson. You talked about being, very confident about tomorrow. Could you talk a little bit about what you've seen from Boeing, sort of that supports that perspective?
With regard to Boeing, what?
You talked about being very confident in the launch tomorrow. I just was curious if you could talk a little bit about what you've seen on the Boeing side, that gives you that perspective, that feeling about the launch.
The flight readiness review, smooth as glass, no hitch. I mean, this is a no fooling event that occurs over a week before launch. Started all day, ended up after 5, going through every detail of the launch, led by the lady that heads up the mission directorate, Kathy Leaders. And that's what gives me the confidence. And we'll see tomorrow. But I think you're going to be very pleased.
So unfortunately, that's all the time we have with this group this morning, but stay tuned for a NASA social media event beginning on NASA TV at 11 a.m. And Senator Nelson, do you have any closing words to close us out?
The folks that are flanking me are illustrative of the kind of quality that we have. Thanks to Janet, this Space Center is just another marvelous example of NASA's can-do spirit. The three of us operate as a team, and it's a partnership. And I think, is going to work very well. I have the utmost confidence in these two. Their record speaks for itself, not only in the military, but in NASA as well. And in Pam's case, she was after NASA at the FAA and then at DARPA. And we get all of that expansion of her view. So this is indeed a great privilege for me to be back at NASA and to try to offer some little bit of continued public service. So thank you very much.
Thank you all so much for joining us. We hope you'll stick with us for the social media briefing at 11 a.m. And again tomorrow, launch broadcast coverage starts at 2 p.m. Go Atlas and go Starliner.
Good job. Yeah, no, you were like cutting off. Nice job.
So you stay here?
If you want to, you can, but otherwise,
Where do we do the social media?
it's going to be in here with a separate group.
They're doing the Boeing astronauts and the.
Oh, so I don't have to be here?
No.
Okay.
We are excused.
All right. Oh, I thought you were running the social media.
So how'd you think that went?
Oh, very well. I mean,
Fun. It's fun, isn't it?
it was good. Good.
Thank you, Linda.
Hands? I think I see some familiar faces out there. What face parts of it I can see? Mike gets all the hard questions, by the way. Yes. Mike gets them hard.
Good afternoon and welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center here in Florida. I'm Megan Cruz with NASA Communications, and you're here watching the crew and science briefing for tomorrow's OFT-2 launch, targeted for 2:53 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Now, OFT-2 is Boeing's second uncrewed test flight of its Starliner capsule atop a ULA Atlas V rocket. NASA, Boeing, and ULA are targeting a launch later this year for the first crewed flight. And speaking of the crew, we have them here today, along with some other familiar faces, I'm sure. First, we have Chris Ferguson, Director of Starliner Mission Operations and Integration Cruise Systems. And then we have the crew again, as I was saying. We have Commander Butch Wilmore, Pilot Mike Fink, and Mission Specialist Nicole Mann. And then we have Jennifer Buckley, who's the Deputy Chief Scientist of NASA's International Space Station program. Now, each will deliver some opening remarks, and then we'll take your questions. So why don't you take it away, Chris?
Thanks, Megan. Well, good morning. This is a great day. Anytime we get ready to launch a rocket into space is an awesome day. For those of you who did not have the privilege of watching the Atlas V roll out of the vertical integration facility and over to the pad, it completed about an hour ago. So it's sitting out there and ready for what we hope will be weather-dependent on-time launch tomorrow. This has been it's been a long time preparing for this flight. We have taken an awful lot of effort to basically scrutinize every aspect of the Starliner's flight software. We have done mission end-to-end verification tests. We have added an enormous amount of test scripting to the way that we manage our flight software. We have made upgrades to our communication system, all in preparation for what will ultimately be this crew's trip to space. So we're very proud to be, of course, a part of the Commercial Crew Program. We're very proud to be conducting our second flight, and we will be equally proud when we launch the awesome CFT crew here later this year. So it's going to be a great day. We, again, are looking for an on-time launch tomorrow with a docking less than 24 hours later. And then a landing on or about August 5th at one of our western landing sites. We have already deployed our landing teams out there, and they're ready to receive the Starliner upon return. With that, I would like to introduce Butch Barry Wilmore, a good friend. We've known each other a very long time. I am intimately familiar with this crew, as many of you, I think, are well aware. But Butch, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Chris, and good morning. And what an exciting time. Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral launched a lot of spacecraft into space, obviously, but this is human spaceflight, and that's what makes this really special, obviously, for us. We are a bit jealous, I will admit, that we have a rocket that is launching in human spaceflight without a crew on it, but that's a necessary thing. Obviously, when we have to test, we need to make sure systems are ready and ready to go. And just a little bit about human spaceflight, I thought I'd share very briefly. I launched on STS-129 on the Space Shuttle in 2009, and when you go to the pad, there's no one there because the spacecraft is fueled. It's a little bit of a dangerous environment, so the crew has to obviously get there. So it's the crew and the bus driver, right? And we get out, you go walk over. We walked over to the Space Shuttle Atlantis, and we looked up, and there, that American flag on the side of the Space Shuttle. It was, without question, the proudest moment of my professional career, because it encompassed a nation coming together to do great things. That's what that flag represented on the side of that space shuttle. And it's the same thing with Starliner. We'll go to the pad eventually, and we will walk up to that pad. It'll be fueled and ready to go, us and the bus driver, and we'll look up and we'll see that American flag, and it's going to mean the exact same thing. We look forward to that day. It will get here eventually, but right now, obviously, the focus is OFT-2, and we're excited about what's coming in the next week. And so with that, that's all I have to say. I'll hand it over to our Joint Operations Commander, Mike Fink.
Yeah, good morning. You heard it. We are excited. We're excited for orbital flight test, right? So that's what we're in the flight test phase of getting a capability to the International Space Station. After orbital flight test comes crew flight test, and then regularly scheduled programs. And what it really does, and what it really helps, it gives us NASA the ability to go to the International Space Station, have 4 people getting a lot of fantastic science done aboard the space station. So OFT-2 is paving the way, and we're excited. We're looking for our flight coming soon. And with that, our pilot, the Joint Ops Commander, she's the pilot, Nicole Mann, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Marine Corps.
Thank you, Spanky. Let's talk about this a little bit in the big picture of things. This is an exciting moment for OFT2 and for the NASA Boeing team, but this is also part of Commercial Crew Program and Launch America. We've already returned capabilities to launch humans from American soil, and now we're continuing that effort with these two dissimilar companies that will have spacecraft taking astronauts to the International Space Station. This is paving the way for our larger strategic goal of putting people beyond low Earth orbit. We'll partner with commercial industry, with our international partners, to the moon as part of the Artemis program, and eventually to Mars. So it's a very exciting time as we see the commercialization beginning of low Earth orbit and exploration beyond. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer Buckley, who's been with NASA for over 15 years and is our Deputy Chief Scientist for the International Space Station.
Thank you, Nicole. It's my pleasure to be here today to talk about the Commercial Crew Program and how it enables research on ISS. So to date, we've done over 3,000 experiments on the International Space Station, and the research community is very much looking forward to bringing on another commercial crew provider. You know, the Commercial Crew Program not only means more crew members and more cargo, which means more science, but it also really enabled an infrastructure to not only get crew back more quickly, but also our science samples more quickly. So this is really important. This gets the research in the hands of researchers in a matter of hours now, and really opens up what we're able to study. Now we can look at things like readaptation when our science returns from space. So we're very excited about this program and for the launch coming up this week.
Thanks, everyone. You know, you can tell how excited everybody is up here, and we're excited to have you guys here. So we're going to start taking your questions. And what we're going to do is we're going to alternate between some of you guys in the room as well as social media and over the phone. Those on social media, remember, you can still ask questions with hashtag AskNASA or in the Facebook or YouTube chat. And then remember, please keep it to one question so that we can get to as many people as possible. All right, so the first one on social media is, are you attempting a land landing, or is this going to be a splashdown? Whoever wants to take that.
I'll start. So this will be a land landing at one of 4 different western United States landing spots. We descend under parachutes initially, and then at approximately 3,000 feet off the ground, we will jettison our base heat shield, and we inflate what we call landing airbags, which cushion the final impact on ground. It's a great opportunity. We can get to the crew very quickly. We can also extract science payload and get it back to the likes of Jennifer before too long. So again, we're a land lander.
Great. Yeah, and I'll just add real quick that Fergie mentioned the part that we look forward to is the cushioned portion of that.
Yeah, we didn't have airbags on the Soyuz.
No, we did not. So landing on water, obviously the water gives. Land does not give so much. So the cushion part, that'll be cool.
Yo, airbags.
Perfect. One from the room here.
Hi, Derek Wise with Space Explored. So obviously the delay with the original OFT wasn't ideal, but how does having this second orbital flight test raise your confidence in the crew flight test?
All right. So all of us here, Chris included, are flight testers from our various services before we became astronauts. This is how we do it. We stepwise build, and if something doesn't work right, we fix it and go fly it again. And this is exactly what Boeing decided to do. They're going to get it right this time, and then we're going to have super confidence for the crew on board for crew flight test. Adding a crew on board actually is a great thing too, because we add an extra element of safety and redundancy. So if for some reason the automation can't handle whatever situation we might find ourselves in, we can hit the manual buttons and go manual and fly the spacecraft all the way up to docking if needed. So it really we're really trying to ensure crew success, mission success here, including being able to help out the International Space Station. So this is it's a fantastic spacecraft. I've been on this will be my 3rd one, and I'm just a big fan of Starliner.
Great. And we'll take one from the phone now. This is David Hurley with Discovery.
Thanks very much. Butch just referred to it, but Nicole, Boeing talked about the fact if a crew had been on board on OFT-1, there would not have been the problems because you would have overridden the system. So I'd like a kind of a broad answer about automation and human interaction and interface and where we are with that and what that all means. And Chris, when are you getting back in the rotation?
A great question. And now, if we had been on board, I'm not to say that nothing would have gone wrong. Certainly, we had some challenges. But crew brings a different capability, as Spanky mentioned. And so what you'll see with Starliner is that it's an incredible jump in technology as far as automation goes. It's a very robust spacecraft with a ton of capability. Someday, we're going to get to the point where that spacecraft flies the mission all with the automation and no interaction from crew. We're not quite there yet. So part of our mission as test pilots on board the first experimental test flight of this new spacecraft is to test out those backup systems. So we will turn off the automation. We will take over manually. We will fly the spacecraft. We will test out that backup system so that for future crews, in the case that they have a problem with the automation, we have confidence that the backup systems will work. So that's all part of the building process and the rigor and tests that we do for spaceflight.
And as for being back in the rotation, primary job number one, let's get these guys up to space station, get them back safely, and then we'll see where things go from there.
Great. And we have a question from Facebook now. So what will the sensors on Rosie the Rocketeer be monitoring in regards to how the flight will affect the astronauts?
Okay, I'll take that one. So on our very first test flight, we did have Rosie well instrumented. We collected the data that we needed. We processed the data, and it was actually very good. Rosie's predominant job on this flight is to be essentially a weight and balance machine. We do not have her instrumented. We will not be getting any instrumentation data off of her. But she is there to essentially maintain a good weight and balance as if a crew member were really there. So she's, her job is largely to just enjoy the ride.
Great. Let's take one from the room now.
Amy from space.com. So my question is for any one of you three, if you want to answer. What has your role been in the past 18 months in getting this capsule ready for reflight?
Well, I would say that all of us, like Mike mentioned when we started out, we are flight testers. That's what we trained for back when we were in our various services. And to have the opportunity to take place in the first flight of a spacecraft, I mean, none of us would have ever dreamed that we'd be sitting in these positions. None of us. So it's fascinating. And we're in the sim. Obviously, it's a new spacecraft, new systems, new software. You find things here and there that are not working exactly perfectly, and that's what flight test does. We go through those processes, identify the problems, rectify the problems, and move forward. So it's a fascinating, wonderful place to be at this point, and we're just excited that we have the opportunity, obviously.
Okay, we have one question on the phone. This is Jackie Goddard, Times of London.
Yes, hello, thank you. My question is for Chris Ferguson. Firstly, no woman wants to just be called weight and balance in a spacecraft, but poor old Rosie. But initially, you were lined up to fly on the first crewed mission, and then you made that switch. And I wondered what it feels like to be now on the more terrestrial side of preparing for that, whether you find yourself being a little envious and how that has changed the dynamic for you. Thank you very much.
That's a great question. I can tell you that within 2 weeks of launch, I enjoyed wearing one of those flight suits more than one of these. It's a little more hectic, right? You're worried about a lot of the details. And there's a pretty good elevation of, I'll just call it general work hours, in the month and in the weeks leading to flight. But I enjoy that job just as much, and we're very proud of our crew and looking forward to seeing them go fly.
Great. All right, someone else from the room here.
Hey, thank you. Joey Roulette with The Verge. Question for the Starliner astronauts, similar to one that was already asked, but how much more engaged were you this time around in the Starliner preparations than you were before the 2019 test?
I'd like to say that we were engaged then, and we're engaged now, and we'll continue to be engaged for our flight. To be honest, the first OFT and OFT2, the team at Boeing and the mission operations that are happening in Houston, Texas, that team is ready to go. They're operators. They're used to working with automation, and they're used to they totally understand the spacecraft. And then you add what Chris Ferguson and his team bring to the mission management. So if they have to make big decisions in real time, they're ready to go. So we are part of those teams. We've made contributions, and we've been in lots of simulations to help get everybody trained. So the whole team is ready.
Just one more follow-up. How was the end-to-end test? I think you guys participated in that. If you could kind of give just like a general scope of how many more hours you might have put in this time around, or if there's any kind of major difference. Thanks.
Yeah, Chris can add, because this was definitely a Boeing event. But from what we as a crew saw, the end-to-end test was great. The software, we started running it hours before launch, kind of where we are now, and all the way through landing. And that included docking to the International Space Station. There were a few pre-planned malfunctions to make sure that the fault detection and isolation software would work, and it was super smooth. And that's how we want our software to work.
And Chris, this is probably a question for you from Twitter. Does Starliner support automatic docking to the ISS, or the astronauts have to operate that manually?
It fully supports automated docking. That said, the astronauts can take over at any time. And also using the onboard, what we call relative navigation system, dock as well. So we can work it either way.
Okay, we'll do one from the phone, and then we'll head to a couple people here in the room. So we have Paul Brinkman with United Press International.
Hi, yeah, thanks for taking my question. I don't know about any of you, but as a journalist, I'm sort of having a sense of deja vu, because there was a lot of confidence and excitement, before the last test flight in 2019. So I'm just wondering if any of you are feeling that, I guess for Nicole or Chris, and specifically any of the lessons learned from that investigation of that mishap. Were those applied at all to these readiness reviews, or is that all just like ancient history, I guess? Thanks.
Well, it's certainly not ancient history. I think many of you are aware there was an independent review team that was assembled after the first OFT flight. They came out with 80 recommendations that they recommended that we implement. A significantly less portion, I think it was about 25% of them, were considered mandatory. Boeing went and we fixed everyone. We addressed everyone. We want this next flight to be as we'll call it, incident-free, as clean as it can possibly be. There was some indication made about an end-to-end test. We called it the ASIL mission rehearsal, AMR. It ran from launch minus 30 hours all the way through touchdown plus a couple hours. It was a 100-hour plus simulation, something we had never done. And what that did is it stitched together every element of the mission that we had previously tested thoroughly but independently, and gave us an opportunity to see really how the vehicle performs over the full duration of an entire mission. So we have really, I'll call it thoroughly dug into, tested, and verified hundreds of times, the independent, the software code to ensure that it performs exactly the way we intend on OFT2.
We'll take two questions from the room here.
Thank you. Sawyer Rosenstein with Talking Space. Chris, you talked earlier about all of the different changes that have been made to the Starliner capsule. So I guess which system from the ground are you in particular looking to see the most from? And for the crew, which systems will you guys be really trying to focus on during this test flight ahead of your eventual flights?
So I'll keep it real short. One thing I'm very interested in, I think most of you are aware we're flying with a fully up abort capable system this time. We had mass simulators for the portion of the abort system for OFT1. Interested in see, of course, we never plan to use the abort system. However, we will not be able to monitor its performance and ensure that, we don't see anything unexpected. And then, sort of, to me, we also have an entry cover. We're, a way to protect the docking mechanism for the heat of reentry. This will be the first time that we're using an entry cover. Entry cover has to be opened once we get on orbit and then closed prior to landing. So those are the two biggies for me.
Okay, perfect. And another, I'm so sorry.
I think from a crew perspective, the second part of that question is we'll be really focused on the portion of the mission that we did not get a chance to accomplish on OFT. So specifically, that's the rendezvous and docking. We'll be looking at the relative navigation system. VESTA is a series of cameras that provides us that capability. So we're excited to see from the crew displays what's that actually going to look like, vice to just what we have in the simulators. Of course, docking and then undocking are the other major components of this test that we'll specifically be watching.
Go ahead.
Ken Kramer, Space Up Close. Thanks. Good luck on the mission. For the crew, we were here a couple of weeks ago, and you arrived with the booster. I'm wondering if you got any more clarity on how long your mission might be, a couple of days, couple of months. You didn't have too much clarity on that. And how much science are you doing to carry out experiments on the ISS if it might be a longer mission?
Well, I can tell you that we are completely fully trained to do a full mission 6 months or longer, as long as the spacecraft, I think the spacecraft's rated for like 220 days attached to the space station. So we're fully trained and ready to go and do that. But our focus is obviously very broad, but our detailed focus is on this flight. This is an experimental test flight, and that's what our focus is. And if it's 8 days or 8 months, whatever it winds up being, that's what we're going to what we are prepared to do and accomplish. So flight tests, the objectives that we have set in front of us are the key for this. And honestly, wherever we fit in is where we'll go. It depends on the needs of the space station as far as duration of the mission. So if the space station needs us for a couple months, that's what it'll be. If it needs us for 6 months, that's what it'll be. If it really doesn't need us at the time, but it's a good window to go to the space station, and it just becomes a test flight, that'll be fine with us.
But that includes the science. We fully support Jennifer and her team on the science program. We're trained up in all the science programs goes. And as we get closer to our launch date and we know exactly what experiments are going to be the focus, we'll get the extra training. Again, not to interfere with our flight tests like Butch said, but we're definitely a science crew.
And just to comment on a standard crew expedition, we do anywhere up to about 300 experiments per 6 months.
This question's from social. It's from an 11-year-old from North Carolina. He wants to know how long the training process is before you launch. Also, what is the fastest speeds you'll experience?
So that training process starts the day you show up at NASA, and it never stops. But it's really exciting. It's some of the coolest training and learning that you'll ever do. Specifically for a mission, training starts about 2 years prior to your launch to train specifically what you'll be doing on that mission, if it's a spacewalk or science, or in our case, an experimental test flight. But that training continues the entire time. Fortunately, coming back home, we're going to reach just over 25 Mach. So that's going to be the fastest I've ever gone. These gentlemen have flown before, but we're looking forward to those speeds.
Yeah, you get a patch if you fly 25 Mach, and you'll see the astronauts traditionally have them, those who've flown. I think, Butch, you're wearing your shuttle one. I'm wearing my Soyuz one, and we have a new patch that has a Starliner on it, but we're not allowed to wear it till we go Mach 25. I'm looking forward to watching Duke go Mach 25 for the first time.
I've got a spot for it on my flight suit, so I'm ready.
All right, we have one more on social, and then I do see we have 2 or 3 in the room here. So the one on social is, how will Starliner contribute to the future of space exploration and continue the excitement of space among our youth?
Nicole, you've got a good answer for that.
Well, I think I'll answer from the first part of we talked a little bit about the big mission of how Starliner fits into human exploration, right? This is a huge component to returning this launch capability from the United States and having this sustained dissimilar redundancy between SpaceX and Boeing, and so that we're not reliant on just one company to get astronauts to the International Space Station. And as we look at low Earth orbit, you've seen a lot of commercial launches recently. You're going to see more folks in low Earth orbit that are not NASA astronauts. That's great. This is goodness. I think for the younger generation, they're going to see scientists, engineers, maybe journalists in space, and they're going to be able to capture the amazement of space, and they're going to be able to share these experiences and the things that we learn better so than astronauts are able to do so. And I think for these kids that they are going to see that there's opportunities for them in space in whichever capacity that they would like to participate. And so hopefully they'll realize that a lot of these barriers or maybe limitations from the past are being broken down and the opportunities are there for the taking. It will also increase our science capability quite a bit, which I think Jennifer would probably be best suited to touch on.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we talked earlier, we having more crew on orbit and more cargo back and forth to ISS means we can do more science. We really do a wide variety of science. So we do experiments in everything from human research to fluid physics, to technology demonstrations, life sciences, as well as education. So that is a component of our mission. And so students have been very successful in student-involved experiments on ISS to date, and I look forward to seeing that increase.
Yeah, very bright future for all of us. Okay, one in the room here.
Chris Gephardt with NASA Spaceflight for Chris Ferguson. One of the other things that popped up on OFT was a communications issue, some sort of interference with the communication system. I'm just wondering, what was the ultimate root cause of that investigation and what were the fixes?
Yeah. So there were a couple. One of them had to do with locking on to a bad TGRS frequency. We've got plenty of mitigations in place for that. In fact, for the crewed flight test, we are going to roll on a new, what we call communications transceiver that is a little more robust and resistant to that. But we have mitigation ways to detect if we have what we call a false lock, and we'll break that lock and we'll reacquire. So that's one of them. Another one, we discovered that we were really looking a little too close with our antennas to the Earth's horizon, and therefore we were picking up a lot of interfering frequencies, and those interfering frequencies all fall in the region of cell phones, believe it or not. So we now have actually canted our view of the horizon. We sort of mask out that noisy area. And we've taken other measures. We point ourselves in what we call communications-friendly attitudes to try to make sure that we minimize our exposure to that noise. So I think the biggest thing is for the crewed flight test and subsequents, we're going to roll on a new transceiver which will really permanently put a lot of these issues behind us. But in the interim, we've got a lot of good measures in place to ensure we have good comm throughout the flight.
Great, thank you. And the last question from the room here.
Rachel Nail with Florida Today. This is a little bit of a follow-on on what Nicole just was talking about. Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin just flew, folks on these suborbital space flights. And there's a little bit of a controversy. Should these people be considered astronauts? Should they be called astronauts? I'm very curious what you guys think about these passengers that are on these suborbital space flights, now and in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that we are excited that more people are coming to space. Just to stand on the shoulders of Nicole, there is that only 550 people plus or minus have been to space, and the more people that can see our beautiful planet, see what our eyes have seen, the better it off is for all of humanity. And the more companies that we have is more jobs for everyone, including here on the Space Coast. So this is all goodness, as Nicole said. What we call these people, that's hard to say. We just say that we called Alan Shepard an astronaut when he did his suborbital flight along with Gus on Mercury Redstone. But these people, some folks who go to there are not professional astronauts like it's our profession. So what to call them is a very good question. But we're glad that more people are seeing space.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. This brings us to the end of this briefing. Thank you to everyone who participated and asked questions. Again, a reminder that the launch tomorrow is targeted for 2:53 p.m. Eastern Time. Our launch coverage will begin at 2, so we hope to see you then. Thanks.